The tractor was Mike Davidson's pride and joy, not just any tractor, a gleaming John Deere 5075E with custom modifications that had cost him nearly as much as the down payment on his house. He'd saved for 3 years to afford it, working overtime at the engineering firm where he specialized in agricultural equipment design. The irony wasn't lost on him, designing farm equipment by day and coming home to his own little slice of rural paradise where he could put theory into practice. Mike hadn't always planned on living in a subdivision like Oak Grove Acres. He'd grown up on a proper farm 2 counties over, but when the job opportunity came up, he and Sarah decided that the 5-acre lots of Oak Grove offered a reasonable compromise. Enough land to grow some crops and tinker with his machinery, but close enough to the city for Sarah's nursing job at the regional hospital. What they hadn't counted on was Elaine Pritchard, current president of the Oak Grove Acres Homeowners Association and self-appointed guardian of property values. Within the first month of moving in, Mike had received no fewer than 3 friendly notices about everything from the height of his mailbox, allegedly 2 inches above regulation, to the shade of beige he'd chosen for his garden shed, apparently not matching the approved earth tone palette. "That woman is going to be the death of me," Mike muttered as he climbed down from the tractor's cab after finishing the spring tilling of his vegetable garden. He wiped sweat from his brow and admired his handiwork. Neat rows of freshly turned soil ready for the tomatoes, peppers, and corn that Sarah had started from seed in their sunroom. The late April sun was warm on his shoulders as he walked toward the house, tossing the tractor keys into the air and catching them with a satisfied smile. He'd installed a new security system on the tractor just last weekend. A custom auto-locking mechanism tied to a proximity sensor in the key fob. It was perhaps overkill for Oak Grove Acres, but old habits from the farm died hard. Equipment theft had been a real concern back home. "Looks good," as Sarah called from the back porch, where she sat nursing a glass of iced tea. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore the faded jeans and flannel shirt that Mike always thought made her look like the farm girl she definitely wasn't. Though I think Elaine was taking pictures from her driveway again. Mike groaned. "What now?" "The garden's well within setback requirements. I measured 3 times. Sarah shrugged, a mischievous smile playing at her lips. "Maybe she's just admiring your technique." Before Mike could respond, his phone chimed with the distinctive tone he'd set for HOA emails. With an exaggerated eye roll that made Sarah laugh, he pulled out his phone and scanned the message. "You've got to be kidding me," he said, his voice rising with each word. "They're organizing a community beautification day this weekend and are requesting the use of all member-owned equipment." He looked up at Sarah, indignation clear on his face. "They want my tractor." "They can request all they want," Sarah said reasonably. "Doesn't mean you have to say yes." Mike slipped his phone back into his pocket and climbed the steps to join his wife on the porch. "You're right. Besides, we'll be at your sister's wedding this weekend anyway." He kissed Sarah's forehead and settled into the chair beside her, letting the tension drain from his shoulders as they watched the sun begin its descent over their imperfectly perfect piece of suburbia. Neither of them could have possibly imagined that by Monday morning, Mike's beloved tractor would be at the center of the biggest scandal Oak Grove Acres had ever seen. The wedding weekend arrived with perfect timing. As Mike and Sarah packed their formal wear into garment bags on Friday afternoon, the neighborhood buzzed with activity. Trucks delivered mulch, flowers, and landscaping supplies to the community center, where Elaine Pritchard directed operations with clipboard in hand and determination in her step. "Did you respond to her email about the tractor?" Sarah asked, zipping up her bridesmaid dress. Mike nodded, folding a dress shirt with military precision. "Told her we'd be out of town and that the tractor wouldn't be available." Polite but firm. He glanced out their bedroom window at the growing commotion. "Looks like they're getting along fine without it anyway." What Mike couldn't see from his vantage point was Elaine's frustration mounting with each passing hour. The original plan called for all the heavy lifting to be done by Saturday afternoon, but their rented mini excavator had been canceled last minute due to a scheduling error. "We simply cannot complete the meditation garden without proper equipment," Elaine insisted to the small gathering of HOA board members. "The drainage work alone requires moving several cubic yards of soil." Bernard Willis, the treasurer, who'd been reluctantly roped into volunteering, wiped sweat from his balding head. "Maybe we scale back? Just do the flower beds this weekend and save the meditation garden for next month?" The suggestion earned him a glacial stare from Elaine. "The garden was promised in the spring newsletter, Bernard. The Property Values Committee has already determined it could raise home values by up to 2%. "What about Davidson's tractor?" offered Marjorie Lennox, the vice president who generally voted whichever way Elaine did. "I saw him using it just the other day. It looks powerful enough." Elaine's lips pursed into a thin line. "He claims to be out of town this weekend. How convenient." "Well, if he's not here, he's not here," Bernard said with a shrug, secretly relieved for any excuse to cut the day short. But Elaine wasn't finished. She tapped her manicured nails against her clipboard thoughtfully. "He parks it behind that shed of his. The one that's the wrong shade of beige." Her eyes narrowed. Did anyone actually see them leave? Meanwhile, 200 miles away, Mike and Sarah were enjoying the rehearsal dinner at a charming vineyard owned by the groom's family. Sarah's sister was practically glowing with happiness, and the wine flowed freely as the evening progressed. "To think we almost postponed the trip because of your precious tractor," Sarah teased, clinking her glass against Mike's. He grinned, relaxed for the first time in weeks. "The tractor's fine. It's locked up tight. And I doubt even Elaine would trespass just to commandeer equipment." Back in Oak Grove Acres, darkness had fallen. Most volunteers had gone home, but Elaine remained. The meditation garden plan spread across the hood of her Lexus SUV. The motion-activated security lights in Mike's backyard flicked on as she approached the shed, casting long shadows across the lawn. "This is for the good of the community," she muttered to herself, justifying what she was about to do. The bylaws clearly state that members shall contribute to the upkeep and improvement of common areas. Section 7, paragraph 3. She'd noticed during her previous property violation documentation that Mike often left the shed unlocked. Not that she'd checked the door handle during her inspections, of course. That would be inappropriate. She'd merely observed. The shed door swung open with a satisfying click. Inside, the John Deere gleamed in the dim light filtering through the windows. Elaine felt a flutter of excitement. Tomorrow's beautification project would be saved, and everyone would thank her for her resourcefulness. Mike would never even know it had been borrowed. She'd have it back by Sunday evening, washed and polished. What she didn't realize as she searched the shed for the keys was that Mike Davidson had taken them with him, a habit from growing up on a farm where equipment theft was common. And what she couldn't possibly know was that the tractor's sophisticated security system was designed to do much more than simply prevent theft. As Saturday morning dawned, Sarah snapped photos of her sister getting ready for the big day, while Mike helped the groomsmen set up the outdoor ceremony space. Neither had any idea that back home, Elaine Pritchard was gathering a small team of volunteers for what she called a special surprise addition to our beautification project. Saturday morning in Oak Grove Acres dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for community beautification. Elaine Pritchard arrived at the community center at 7 a.m. sharp, dressed in what she considered appropriate supervision attire: pressed khaki pants, a polo shirt embroidered with the HOA logo she commissioned last year, and spotless white sneakers that had never known dirt. By 7:30, a small crew of volunteers had assembled, most looking like they'd rather be anywhere else on a Saturday morning. Renard Willis yawned repeatedly, still wondering how he let himself get talked into this again. "Where's the equipment rental?" he asked, surveying the piles of mulch and decorative stone with mounting dread. Elaine smiled with the self-satisfaction of someone who'd solved an impossible puzzle. "I've made alternative arrangements. We won't need the rental after all." She gathered the group in a tight circle, speaking in hushed tones despite being the only people on the property. "As board members, we have a responsibility to utilize all available resources for the betterment of Oak Grove Acres. Section 12 of the bylaws grants the board emergency powers to maintain property values." Marjorie nodded eagerly while Bernard's face creased with concern. "Are you talking about Davidson's tractor?" he asked. "I thought you said he declined." "He's not using it this weekend," Elaine replied smoothly, "and will return it in better condition than we found it. I've already arranged for a professional cleaning on Sunday." Bernard shifted uncomfortably. "Did you get permission? Or at least find the keys?" Elaine's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "I've taken care of everything. Now shall we proceed?" What Elaine had taken care of was calling her nephew Tyler, a 19-year-old community college student who fancied himself a mechanical genius. He'd arrived 20 minutes earlier and was currently examining the tractor's ignition system. "Can you start it?" Elaine asked, approaching the shed with Marjorie and a reluctant Bernard in tow. Tyler pushed his baseball cap back and grinned. "Sure thing," on Elaine. "These old farm machines are basic. No fancy computers or anything." Had Mike been present, he would have laughed at the irony of that statement. His tractor was anything but basic, with its aftermarket security system and custom electronics that he'd installed himself. Tyler fiddled with some wires under the steering column, and to everyone's surprise, especially his own, the engine roared to life on his first attempt. "See," Tyler said, patting the hood proudly. "Piece of cake." What none of them realized was that Mike's security system operated on a countdown timer. Once started without the proximity of the authorized key fob, the tractor would run normally for exactly 30 minutes before initiating its shutdown sequence. Long enough, Mike had reason for a thief to think they'd gotten away with it, but not long enough to get very far. Elaine clapped her hands in delight. "Excellent. Now let's get it over to the meditation garden site. Tyler, do you know how to drive this thing?" Tyler's confidence never wavered. How hard can it be? Meanwhile, 200 miles away, Mike's phone buzzed in his pocket as he adjusted his tie for the wedding ceremony. A security notification flashed on his screen. Tractor ignition activated. His heart skipped a beat, but he quickly dismissed it, likely a false alarm from a power surge or system glitch. He silenced his phone and slipped it back into his pocket. Sarah's sister was getting married in 15 minutes. Farm equipment would have to wait. Back at Oak Grove Acres, Tyler had managed to maneuver the tractor across Mike's property and onto the community path that led to the planned meditation garden site. Elaine walked alongside, already envisioning the praise she would receive for her resourcefulness and dedication to community improvement. "We'll need to dig out that low area for the cod pond first," she instructed, pointing to a marshy section at the edge of the community property. Recent spring rains had left the ground particularly soft and waterlogged, a detail the landscaping consultant had noted in his report, which Elaine had skimmed rather than read thoroughly. Tyler angled the tractor toward the soggy area, the heavy machine leaving deep tracks in the soft ground. The other volunteers gathered around the site, some beginning to plant flowers along the perimeter while Bernard nervously checked his watch. "Should we really be using Davidson's equipment without explicit permission?" he asked Elaine for the third time. She wigged dismissively. "As HOA president, I'm authorized to take necessary actions for community improvement. He'll understand once he sees the finished project." Just as Tyler reached the center of what would become the koi pond, the tractor suddenly shuddered. The engine made a series of beeping sounds, followed by a computerized voice that none of them could quite make out over the diesel rumble. Then, without warning, the engine shut down completely. "What happened?" Elaine demanded, marching toward the now silent machine. Tyler turned the key repeatedly, but nothing happened. "I don't know. It just died." What they couldn't see was the small digital display on the custom dashboard showing a countdown: CQRT, LOCKDOVUN, System will remain disabled F4, 24:00. As Tyler continued his futile attempts to restart the engine, the tractor began to sink, ever so slowly, into the waterlogged earth. Elaine's spotless white sneakers were already ankle-deep in mud as she reached the tractor, her face flushed with frustration and embarrassment. "Get it started right now," she hissed at her nephew. "We have work to do." But no amount of key turning, wire crossing, or button pushing would bring the machine back to life. Mike Davidson's tractor had gone into complete lockdown mode, exactly as designed, straining both it and Elaine in what was rapidly becoming a muddy predicament of epic proportions. By noon, Elaine Pritchard's community beautification project had devolved into a full-blown crisis. The tractor sat immobile, its massive tires now sunk nearly 8 inches into the saturated ground. Each attempt to free it only seemed to make matters worse. Tyler had abandoned his position in the driver's seat after his last effort, had sent a spectacular spray of mud across Elaine's khaki pants and logo polo. "This is unacceptable," Elaine fumed, futilely trying to wipe mud from her clothing with a landscaping glove. "That machine must be defective. Davidson should be held responsible for providing faulty equipment to the community." Bernard Willis could no longer hide his discomfort with the situation. "Elaine, he didn't provide it. We took it without permission." "Borrowed," she corrected sharply. "We borrowed it for a community purpose, which is well within our rights according to section." "I don't think any section of the bylaws covers hot wiring someone's equipment," Bernard interrupted, showing uncharacteristic backbone. "I'm going home. You should return that tractor and hope Davidson doesn't press charges." Elaine's face paled slightly at the word charges, but she quickly recovered. "Don't be dramatic, Bernard. This is a simple misunderstanding between neighbors." As Bernard walked away, several other volunteers exchanged glances and began packing up their gardening tools. Within 15 minutes, only Elaine, Marjorie, and an increasingly nervous Tyler remained at the site. "What now?" Marjorie asked, eyeing the sinking tractor with growing alarm. "We need a tow truck," Tyler suggested, wiping muddy hands on his jeans. Elaine shook her head emphatically. "Absolutely not. Can you imagine the neighborhood gossip if we have to call a tow truck to pull Davidson's tractor out of the mud? We need to handle this discreetly." "But Aunt Elaine," Tyler protested, "that thing's not starting again. I tried everything." Elaine paced in a small circle, careful to stay on somewhat solid ground. "We need to get it out before anyone notices. Tyler, have you friends with trucks?" The young man shrugged. "Yeah, but not like heavy-duty ones that could pull this beast." As the three conspirators debated their limited options, more security alerts buzzed on Mike's silenced phone. The wedding was in full swing, with Sarah catching the bouquet to enthusiastic applause. Mike spun her around on the dance floor, blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding back in Oak Grove Acres. By mid-afternoon, news of the tractor incident had spread throughout the neighborhood despite Elaine's attempts at discretion. Several residents drove by slowly, pretending to be out for casual Saturday drives while craning their necks to see the spectacle. A few even took photos from the community path. Ron Barker, who lived 3 doors down from Mike and had endured his own battles with Elaine over an unauthorized bird bath, couldn't resist stopping to survey the scene. "Looks like you're in a bit of a situation there, Elaine," he called out cheerfully. "That wouldn't happen to be Mike Davidson's tractor, would it?" "This is an official HOA project, Ron," Elaine replied stiffly. "Nothing to concern yourself with." Ron nodded sagely, making no attempt to hide his amusement. "Official HOA project using Mike's tractor, while he's at a wedding this weekend? Interesting approach." Elaine's head snapped up. "How do you know where Davidson is?" "Sarah posted photos from the rehearsal dinner last night. Whole neighborhood's been following along on Facebook." Ron chuckled. "Nice day for a wedding." "Not such a nice day for whatever this is." As Ron walked away, Elaine turned to Marjorie with undisguised panic in her eyes. "People know this is a disaster." By late afternoon, the tractor had sunk even deeper, and the spring sky had begun to darken with approaching rain clouds. Elaine's pristine outfit was now ruined, her white sneakers transformed to a muddy brown. Even her carefully styled hair had fallen victim to the humidity and stress. "I'm calling Peterson's Towing," she finally conceded, her voice hollow with defeat. "We'll deal with the consequences on Monday." "What about Mr. Davidson?" Tyler asked. "Shouldn't we tell him what happened?" Elaine squared her shoulders. "I will handle Davidson when he returns. This was a community effort that encountered unexpected difficulties. Nothing more." As if on cue, fat raindrops began to fall, quickly turning into a steady downpour that sent the remaining trio scrambling for cover. They retreated to Elaine's Lexus, watching through rain-streaked windows as water pooled around the abandoned tractor. "The tow truck can't come until tomorrow morning," Elaine announced after a brief phone call, her voice uncharacteristically small. For the first time in her 3-year reign as HOA president, Elaine Pritchard had no contingency plan, no bylaw to cite, and no way to spin the situation in her favor. The tractor sat in the rain, a muddy monument to her overreach, while somewhere 200 miles away, Mike Davidson danced with his wife, completely oblivious to the storm brewing back home, both literally and figuratively. Sunday dawned gray and miserable in Oak Grove Acres. The rain had continued throughout the night, turning the planned meditation garden site into something more closely resembling a swamp. Mike's tractor had sunk several more inches, with muddy water now reaching halfway up its massive tires. Elaine arrived at 6:30 a.m., hoping to resolve the situation before too many neighbors were awake. She barely slept, spending the night drafting and redrafting a carefully worded email explaining the equipment sharing initiative that had encountered unforeseen terrain challenges. In the harsh light of morning, even she had to admit it sounded ridiculous. Peterson's Towing arrived at 7:15, a burly man named Chuck climbing down from his heavy-duty truck with the resigned expression of someone who'd seen it all before. "This is going to be tricky," he said after assessing the scene. "Ground's too soft for my truck to get close enough without getting stuck itself. Might need to bring in a winch system." Elaine's face fell. "How long will that take?" "Got to call my partner with the equipment. Couple hours at least. And it'll be an extra $350 for the specialized recovery." Marjorie, who had shown surprising loyalty by returning for day 2 of the disaster, gasped at the figure. "The beautification budget is already maxed out," she whispered to Elaine. "Just do what you need to do," Elaine told Chuck, ignoring Marjorie's concern. She would figure out the budget issue later. Right now, she needed that tractor out of sight before Mike Davidson returned. Chuck made his call and began setting up warning cones around the area. A few early morning joggers slowed as they passed, smartphones discreetly capturing the scene for neighborhood social media. By 9 a.m., a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance. Ron Barker had brought a camping chair and a thermos of coffee, settling in for what he loudly described to anyone who would listen as the best Sunday entertainment in Oak Grove history. Meanwhile, 200 miles away, Mike and Sarah were enjoying a leisurely breakfast with the wedding party before beginning their drive home. Mike finally checked his phone properly for the first time since the ceremony. "That's weird," he muttered, scrolling through multiple security alerts from his tractor. "The system's been triggered repeatedly since yesterday morning." Sarah peered over his shoulder. Could it be a glitch? Maybe, but his voice trailed off as he noticed a text message from Ron Barker. "You might want to head home soon. Your tractor's become the star of the neighborhood. Call me." Mike's stomach dropped. He excused himself from the table and stepped outside to call Ron. 5 minutes later, he returned to Sarah, his face a mixture of disbelief and fury. "We need to leave. Now. Elaine Pritchard stole my tractor for her beautification project, and it's currently buried in mud at the community center." Sarah's eyes widened. She did what? On the drive home, Ron kept them updated with a steady stream of texts and photos. By the time they crossed into Oak Grove Acres shortly after 2 p.m., the extraction effort was in full swing. A second tow truck had arrived, and a complex system of winches and cables stretched across what should have been a meditation garden. Mike pulled their car into the community center parking lot, which had filled with spectators treating their recovery operation like a neighborhood block party. Someone had even set up a folding table with lemonade and cookies. As Mike stepped out of the car, a hush fell over the crowd, followed by a wave of whispers. He walked purposefully toward the mud pit, where Chuck and his partner were directing the winch operation. Elaine stood nearby, her mud-stained outfit from yesterday replaced with crisp new attire, as if a wardrobe change could erase the previous day's events. She spotted Mike approaching and visibly steeled herself, plastering on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mike, welcome back. We've had a bit of a situation with some community equipment." "That's my tractor, Elaine," Mike interrupted, his voice calm but carrying across the now silent crowd. "My personal property that you took without permission while I was out of town." Elaine's smile faltered only slightly. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. As I was about to explain in my community-wide email, the HOA bylaws allow for shared use of equipment for official projects and—" "Show me exactly where in the bylaws it says you can hotwire someone's property," Mike challenged. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Bernard Willis, who had returned to witness the resolution of the disaster, called out from the back, "It doesn't, Mike. Some of us tried to tell her that." Elaine's composure finally cracked. "This is absurd. I was trying to improve our community. That ridiculous machine of yours malfunctioned and created this entire situation." "Actually," Mike said, pulling out his phone, "my ridiculous machine worked exactly as designed. It's equipped with a security system that shuts down the engine and locks all functions if it's operated without the authorized key fob. It also," he held up his phone showing the screen to the crowd, "records GPS coordinates and takes periodic snapshots through these small cameras I installed." On his screen was a crystal-clear image of Tyler in the driver's seat, with Elaine standing beside the tractor, pointing imperiously toward the now muddy pit. The crowd's reaction was immediate, a mixture of gasps, laughter, and the unmistakable sound of dozens of social media notifications being created simultaneously. As the tow operators finally managed to free the front end of the tractor from the mud with a loud sucking sound, Elaine Pritchard faced the most challenging moment of her HOA presidency. The carefully constructed authority she wielded over Oak Grove Acres was sinking faster than the tractor had in the mud, and no amount of bylaw citations could pull it back. By late Sunday afternoon, a combination of heavy-duty winches, professional know-how, and no small amount of determination had finally extracted Mike's tractor from its muddy prison. The machine sat on solid ground, caked in mud, but appearing otherwise intact. The same could not be said for Elaine Pritchard's reputation. As the tow operators packed up their equipment, the crowd of neighbors lingered, sensing that the drama wasn't quite over. Mike circled his tractor slowly, inspecting it from every angle, while Sarah stood nearby, alternating between concern for her husband's prized possession and barely concealed amusement at the absurdity of the situation. "What's the damage?" Ron Barker called out, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Mike ran his hand along the tractor's fender, wiping away a clump of mud. "Won't know for sure until I can get it cleaned up and check the undercarriage. These machines are tough, but they're not designed to be submarine vehicles." His comment earned a ripple of laughter from the crowd and a deepening scowl from Elaine, who stood rigidly at the edge of the gathering, Marjorie hovering anxiously at her side. "I assume the HOA insurance will cover any necessary repairs," Mike continued, looking directly at Elaine. "Along with the towing costs, of course." Bernard Willis cleared his throat nervously. "Actually, our insurance might not cover unauthorized use of personal property." "Unauthorized?" Elaine finally found her voice again. "I was acting in my official capacity as HOA president. This was a legitimate community improvement project, which you never put to a formal vote," Bernard pointed out with newfound courage. "And the equipment acquisition was certainly not approved by the board." Mike pulled out his phone again, this time opening his email. "I drafted a detailed account of the incident, including timestamps for my security system showing when the tractor was taken and where it was operated. I'm happy to send this to the HOA board," or he paused meaningfully. "We could discuss a more straightforward resolution." A hush fell over the crowd as everyone waited for Elaine's response. For a moment, she seemed ready to launch into another defense of her actions, but then her shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. "What do you want, Davidson?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. Mike glanced at Sarah, who gave him a slight nod. They'd discussed potential outcomes during the drive home once the initial shock had worn off. "3 things," Mike said, holding up fingers to count them off. "First, the HOA covers all expenses related to this incident, towing, cleaning, and any repairs my tractor needs." Bernard nodded immediately, looking relieved that the demands were starting reasonably. "Second," Mike continued, "my property is exempted from any HOA landscaping restrictions for the next 2 years." My garden, my shed, my equipment, all off limits for inspections and citations. A murmur ran through the crowd. Such an exemption was unprecedented in Oak Grove Acres. That's completely unreasonable, Elaine protested. You can't just opt out of the bylaws. Third, Mike pressed on, ignoring her objection, the meditation garden project is relocated to the other side of the community center, the area with proper drainage that the landscaper originally recommended. And I'll volunteer my tractor, with me operating it, for one day to help complete the project. This final point caught everyone by surprise, especially Elaine. She stared at Mike for a long moment, clearly struggling to understand why he would offer any help after what happened. You'd still help with the garden, she finally asked. Mike shrugged. It's a good project. Poor location, but good project. Our community could use more peaceful spaces. He glanced around at the neighbors who had gathered. But next time, try asking directly instead of taking what isn't yours. A smattering of applause broke out, quickly spreading through the crowd. Even Bernard joined in, earning a betrayed look from Elaine. I'll need to convene a special meeting of the board to, Elaine began, but Bernard cut her off. I think we can agree to these terms immediately, he said, stepping forward and extending his hand to Mike. On behalf of the Oak Grove Acres HOA, we accept your conditions and offer our sincere apologies. As they shook hands, the crowd's approval was evident. Several neighbors approached Mike with offers to help clean the tractor, while others began discussing improved locations for the meditation garden. Elaine stood apart from the activity, her carefully constructed authority visibly crumbling around her. After a few minutes, she slipped away to her Lexus without another word, the slam of her car door barely noticed amid the community's impromptu planning session. 3 weeks later, the Oak Grove Acres newsletter announced a special election for a new HOA president. Bernard Willis ran unopposed and was immediately tasked with overseeing the completion of the meditation garden, now relocated to higher ground the proper drainage. As promised, Mike Davidson operated his freshly cleaned and repaired tractor for the project, efficiently grading the area, while neighbors planted flowers and installed benches. Sarah took photos for the community website, making sure to capture her husband's proud smile as he worked. The garden was completed in a single weekend, without incident or unauthorized equipment use. At the dedication ceremony, Bernard unveiled a small plaque near the garden entrance. Community grows when we work together, not when we take from each other.